This is Beyond the Brand with Dontaye Carter, where we go behind the scenes and tell stories about some of today's most dynamic brands, businesses, and the people behind them. So sit back, relax, and listen to Beyond the Brand. Beyond the Brand, Beyond the Brand, Beyond the Brand.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Beyond the Brand, right here with Dontaye Carter on Justice Media Network. And again, we're all about getting beyond the brand, knowing the stories. We've talked to some great entrepreneurs, some activists, leaders in the community. And I'm just so grateful that we're able to bring on one of my favorite friends here. He's an Emmy award-winning anchor, reporter, one of the best storytellers I've ever known, period. My man, Frank Wiley. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. That introduction is pretty phenomenal. I feel like I need to record it and play it on repeat every time I walk around town. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, but man, you are, hands down. And, I remember back when we were over at Fox 23 in Tulsa, and I just used to sit back and really used to admire how you told the stories, how the words and even just the video, how they just seemed to just, what's the word that I'm looking for right now? I mean, it was all smooth. It was all deep. It was all to the point. And you just had a great way of capturing the voice of the people in a way that, I'll be honest, you don't see too often now.
I appreciate that. I've been able to refine my storytelling over time by kind of connecting to people that I've admired over the years. But when I think back, some of the best storytellers were the people I grew up with. My grandpa sitting on his porch and listening to the stories that he shared of his childhood. I could actually see the pictures that he was describing. And I could not wait to sit on the porch to hear another chapter of his life that I had never been introduced to before, because I just wanted to know him in every way possible. And so I've kind of transferred that to the relationships I've built with the people in the communities that I've lived in. I want to get to know them in an intimate way, and that requires depth and breadth. So the good thing about that is one story leads to another, and once you've garnered the trust of a handful of people, then that pays off big time with the rest of the community, and they entrust you with a lot of valuable information. A lot of times I find them saying, Frank, I don't even know why I told you that. I never figured I would share this or that detail with someone. And that to me is the ultimate compliment, because they know there's no agenda. I just want them to be themselves unapologetically. And I think that may be in part why the stories speak to people differently. And that's not my doing. That's their doing. My doing is just trying to make them feel as comfortable as possible.
So where did this come from? Just this love and admiration for telling stories, for wanting to be on TV, for wanting to be a journalist. Where did that start?
I think that started as a kid. My grandparents raised me. And full disclosure, I grew up in the middle of the crack epidemic. And so I had that refuge with my grandparents being there for me. So I picked up the habits that they had. They loved to sit and watch the news. So by default, guess what? I'm sitting on the floor watching the news.
Yeah.
On their floor set TV. Yeah, one of those old joints. You had to actually go up and turn the TV. There was no remote. And so they'd watch the 4 o'clock news. They'd watch the 5 o'clock news. They'd watch the world news. Then they'd come back and watch the 6 o'clock news. They very rarely stayed up and watched the 10 o'clock news. They would watch the noonday newscast. I knew exactly when sports was going to come on. Looking back, I'm like, man, that's pretty crazy. I had a rundown going in my head. The rundown, for folks who may not be aware, and you know what this is, because you're a producer as well, and it brings out the time frame stories to run in the newscast. And then you couple all of that with the stories that my grandpa was sharing with me while he sat on the porch with me. And I was just absorbing all that. And then to the rear of the house, my grandmother had an in-home shop, a salon. She was a beautician. And so it was connected to the house, but it was somewhat separate from the house. So if I wandered back there, I would hear all kinds of stories. My grandma was the perfect listener as she was doing hair. My grandpa was the perfect storyteller. So they fit perfectly together, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the stories weren't rated G. And if they creeped up to PG level, I might get that look from my big mama. That's what I call her. and that look meant that I needed to leave. And if it went from G all the way up to NC-17, I was just kindly ushered out of the salon. But you just are surrounded by storytellers all day long. And then my grandma took me to missionary services with her on Monday nights. Wednesday nights we had Bible study. Sundays we had church. And the pastor telling stories. And I was the kid that found myself enamored with the way he was sharing these stories. And I would watch the reaction that he was getting from people when he put words together.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of born of all those experiences. My grandma wanted me to get in front of the church and speak in every speaking engagement that was available. I didn't really want to do it, but you don't want to disappoint Big Mama.
Yeah.
So
very true.
You get up and you do it. So now you're doing public speaking. You put your nerves aside because you want to make her happy. Fast forward a couple decades later, and I'm finding myself doing live shots. I'm sitting in a studio in front of loads of people on their TV sets and their mobile devices as they watch me deliver the news. So all those experiences, I'm a culmination of that.
Wow. Now, and I love it, and I really appreciate you even just sharing the depth of your upbringing, because a lot of times we see folks who've achieved great success, and we think just life was just a road full of lollipops for them, where it was just easy, and there's so much. I don't necessarily want to say pain, but it was kind of those moments that produce something within you that's transformative, and I'd also say transformative for television news in terms of the stories that you tell. I mean, you're able to look at issues through a lens of living a life without privilege. Can you talk about just being able to hear kind of the voices of the marginalized and just being able to tell those stories?
Yeah, that's my favorite part of it. And, in previous conversations with you, I fully understand why we as a people, when I say we as a people, African Americans, Black folks don't want to be referred to as marginalized people. I completely understand and respect that. And I say marginalized from a place of admiration, because our opportunities have been marginalized. We have not been centered in discussions. We've been pushed out to the margins, and that involves my friends in the brown community as well.
Yeah.
And so we've got a wealth of stories out there that are not being told. These are stories that you hear in the barbershop.
Yeah.
These are stories that you hear in Big Mama's salon. These are stories that you hear on Papa's porch. These are stories that you hear at the grocery store. These are stories that you hear while pumping gas or at the gym or whatever walk of life you're in at that moment. But these are also stories that aren't being shared by the masses.
Yeah.
Everything we've done has been underground, so to speak. And Harriet Tubman can vouch for that. But even though it's been underground, it's had the biggest movements. Rap was once underground.
Yep.
And now it's global. And I think that it's important that we tell our stories, and you've spoken a lot of truth to this, and I can appreciate that, because I can hear your voice in my head when we have these conversations, and when our lives are so busy we don't get a chance to connect for a while, and you said, Frank, we've got to tell our stories, and that is so true. So hats off to you for that.
But
because if we don't tell them,
yeah. No, but I wanted to say hats off to you too, because when they first started talking about COVID-19 and its impact on on Black lives, specifically Black men, you were one of the first that was up there sounding the alarm, and I've got to give you a ton of credit for that, because this is a issue and a topic where people don't necessarily want to go down because of at the root. There's no way for you to talk about these issues without talking about structural racism and systemic oppression.
Yes, and for me, I often feel like I'm in the way, to answer your question. And I've said that to some of my colleagues who happen to be white, and all I get in return is, "Oh, that's so sad." No, it's so true. I feel like I'm in the way, and no one wants to feel like they're in the way. You read the book Invisible Man, and it seems like our superpower is being hyper-visible and invisible at the same time. There are times I've said how I feel, but yet I feel like someone has grabbed the remote and pressed mute. My lips are moving, but no one's hearing what I'm saying. And so you sat through some of those meetings as well, those editorial meetings where you're raising important topics and bringing that to the table, literally, in these meetings, yet no one is hearing you.
Yeah.
No one sees you. You might as well be invisible. And so, your suggestion goes from a whisper to a stern tone, from a stern tone to where you're shouting, to where, you know what, these are the stories I have to present because this is the community that I found myself immersed in. So if you want me to cover something else, then you're going to have to give me something else, because I'm going to keep bringing these topics to the table. One, because they're viable and important stories. Two, this is where I am. And these are topics that you don't know about because this is not where you are. I have yet to see you guys here in this community. So, I'm trying to educate you. But the third part of it, maybe the most important part, Dontaye, for me, I got to a point to where I became unapologetically who I am. Mm-hmm. I no longer told stories that I thought may grab the attention of people who are making decisions, the gatekeepers. I didn't really tell stories for them. I told stories for you. I told stories for me. I told stories for your homeboys and your homegirls. I told stories to the people who live in the community that I live in, because those stories matter most to me. Those are the stories that you're going to do the best job with because they matter most to you. And we set trends.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about fashion trends. So what we deem as dope, eventually everybody else jumps on board. And if I like it and you like it, and I'm telling the story for you, then why wouldn't everybody else like it? Because we have a filter system that is a bit abrasive, and our people are going to tell you if it ain't right.
Yeah.
And you know that's the truth.
It is.
If you go into the barbershop, they're going to tell you about yourself. And they don't care. They don't care if you're their best friend or not. They're going to. That's what we do. We hold one another accountable.
Yeah.
And so this filter system is telling me that they like what I do, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah. And, I think being able to, so the filter system tells you it's good, but the reason why they know it's good is because what? It's not just because, yeah, like you're shining a light in areas that have been dark for so long. And I mean, I can even remember the Good Friday shootings when we were in Tulsa. And I mean, before police would even talk about what was really going on, the community had already called you. They had already texted you. They had already emailed you. Like, you had so much information before anything was being released because, that's what happens when you have a bond with not just your listeners and viewers, but with people, because I think we get so caught up in, oh, this is a listener, this is a viewer. No, these are people. And when you speak to people, people speak back. And we got to get to a point of taking the humanity away by calling somebody a listener or a viewer. They're people with feelings, with emotions. And when you speak to them and when you connect with them in a viable way, they will reciprocate that relationship.
Yes, it's all about reciprocity. One of the most valuable lessons shared with me by my grandparents: when you come into a room, you do what? You speak.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation before. You speak because if you don't, you're not acknowledging the people who are in there, and they're left to presume that maybe you think you're better than them or they've done something wrong. And so I see this as no different. I come into a community and I speak. I speak to the people there. I acknowledge them. And once they feel acknowledged, they reciprocate that. And once they reciprocate that, the byproduct of that is the story, the packages that are running on air, the conversations that we're disseminating. But that's us reciprocating that respect. I speak to them, they speak to me, I speak back to them. And so we've got a number of topics that we can discuss, but it all starts with acknowledging them, with seeing them, with speaking to them. And it's so simple, yet some people complicate it. We speak to people. And when I say marginalized people too, that involves the LGBTQ community as well. Because I want to share their stories. Because for so long, many folks in those communities felt like they had to live in the shadows. And so I gravitate toward the people who don't feel seen, the people who are constantly ignored. Because you know what? There's an opportunity for them to teach a lot of people a lot of different things. And that's an opportunity for us to erase a lot of ignorance. Yeah. And I relish in that. I simply love getting to know people. I find it such a privilege and fascinating to learn more and more every single day. I really do. And that's part of my pride. When I start a book, then I start another book. Then I'm like 3/4 of the way through like 5 books at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it is, though. You know, when it comes, I mean, there's just so much knowledge out there. And I mean, even with the internet, I mean, it's taken that learning curve that we had of just reading to watching to listening with podcasts and, you know, with videos. And so, I mean, it's so much in the way of how we can ingest this information. But it's also given us a great opportunity to not just, you know, learn about different industries, but just learn more and more about one another. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of. And I really hope even with COVID and what's happening just within the Black community, that people can start to see that, you know, this isn't about pointing the finger at who's right or wrong. It's about justice and making sure that equity and equality in healthcare goes across the board. You know what I'm saying? It's just so much here that I think through the right lens we can just learn from.
Absolutely. And, you know, if we're even thinking about it in the sense of a religious standpoint, rooting out the wrong gives us a chance to exercise America's demons.
Yeah.
And why not go for that? Why not go for broke with that?
Yeah.
Why would we not want to exercise America's demons? Because we all win.
Yeah.
And that's the goal right there. You know, somebody is over here hoarding resources. Sure, they may be sitting pretty, but there's a lot of people who aren't.
Yeah.
And if you're hoarding resources, you're always looking over your shoulder because you know you're doing people wrong.
Yeah. You know, it was so funny, man. I spoke with one of the lawmakers. Well, not lawmakers, but she works for one of the lawmakers in the Canadian Parliament. And she's a descendant of slaves who escaped through the Underground Railroad in Canada. And she was sharing her stories with me, but it was so impactful because, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to her just about how, you know, the steps that, you know, those ancestors of hers took just really changed her entire life. And we were talking about COVID and what the Canadian government was doing for its people. And I just sat back and I told her I'm just so jealous because it just seems like over there you all are so proactive in terms of, you know, the subsidies that they're putting aside, 80% income for all employees, you know, just waiving the mortgage, rent, utilities, taxes, just all the things they were doing to eliminate the fear of what was being created by COVID. And as we were talking, she said, you know, but you got to understand that we're in a different place. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, because, you know, that the sin of slavery left a stain that's very difficult to wash out of the American cloth. And it just really impacted me of, they're able to really see people for people, because Canada is a very diverse country, very diverse. They've got just about every ethnicity there, and the fact that they can work for the whole of people, you know what I'm saying, a lot better than we can, just really surprised me. And her whole point was, it's that stain. It's easier to see people for people when guilt isn't carried. And I was just like, wow. I had never thought about it through that lens. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, it's so true, because, Dr. King says, I can't become what I ought to be until you become what you ought to be. And you can't become what you ought to be until I become what I ought to be. It's simple. You may be winning on the surface, but if you know you're doing people wrong, you're going to be super paranoid about it and looking over your shoulder the whole time, because you're afraid of them taking the resources that you have, not because you have them, but because you probably know that part of that belongs to them too.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to have that. And so I don't really know how to exercise that particular demon. I don't know how to tell a bunch of people who have a lot of resources that they're not willing to share, that they need to share them, other than simply saying that. They can look at the problem, but the bigger problem is they don't want to look at the issues. It doesn't impact them directly. And if they don't look at it, they look away, then they don't feel guilty about it. But I guess that's what we're here for. I'm going to keep putting these stories out there. I can only hope that it reaches the right people and they have a change of heart. Yeah. I do think we can change the world, even if we change one person, because that person is going to change the world in which they exist.
Yeah.
And so that becomes our superpower to change the world right there. We change one mind. I don't know how many people that person comes into contact with, but they have a reach in certain sectors that maybe you or I wouldn't go.
Yeah.
And so that's how our voices live on. And I just feel so passionately about, I passionately pursue equity.
Yeah.
Because I know what it's like to not have that. I spent some time in a foster home because of my dad's ongoing drug addiction. And that opened my eyes up to a whole new world. I must have been about 8 years old in an environment not knowing if or when I would go home. And you remember I remember seeing this little white kid about my age. He came into the facility with a handprint on his face. He blamed himself and said he had said something to upset his mom, and so he had deserved to get slapped, apparently, because the evidence was written all over his face. There were kids who had been abused in ways that I didn't even know were possible. My little 8-year-old self. And that opened my eyes to something that most kids are shielded from. And that stuck with me. And so nobody wants to listen to those kids. Yeah. And those kids become adults. And I find it my responsibility to talk to those individuals. And I guess that's why people find themselves telling me things that they never thought they would share. Maybe I'm communicating in a way that I didn't even realize I was communicating. And maybe that the largest part of that communication is empathy. That's a stain on me that I can't wipe off, is empathy. Yeah. And that's a good stain. Because I wind up walking away feeling other people's pain. I live vicariously through their experiences because of my traumatic experiences that I carry with me. And I find it healing to be that listening ear, and to be that ear that says, I see you, I hear you, and your story deserves the light of day as well. Yeah. Because we can't fix something if we don't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part that we have to talk about is, that's your native language. You know what I'm saying? Like, we talk about, how to communicate. Well, if your first words were help me, or hurt, I'm hurt, help me. Like, if those are your first words, that no matter where you hear those words, the depth of that pain you're going to feel because it's your native tongue. And so I think that's one of your greatest gifts. And so, because it's so funny because, me and you, we share similar backgrounds. And I used to be so frustrated with what I carried, like, God, why would you give me this burden to carry? And it wasn't even until I sat down and started talking to my therapist, and he said, your life story reminds me a lot of Joseph. And he was like, you may not be there now, but he said, when you get to that place of being able to say, what they did, they intended for evil, but God intended for good to come from it. He said, that's when you're going to see the power that God is blessed with you. And I think that's what you're experiencing is, you went through all these moments, but it's like God always intended, like he gives us free will, but with every decision, he still intends for good to come from it. And so no matter how much somebody tries to hurt you or mistreat you, like God is still wanting some good to come from it. And you're able to speak a language and communicate in a way that many people don't even know where to find the words because they haven't lived through it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that is so poignant that you would say that, because when you say they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, right? I feel like I'm in a place where I can say that and not feel vengeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you meant to hurt me, but it's all good. Like, I'm not coming from that place.
Yeah.
I'm not. And I think
Amen.
I'm not at this. I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying, amen. That's powerful.
Yeah, I'm not coming from that place because I think I've reached a phase where it's like, Frank, do you really want to exert energy into trying to really, really do something counterproductive? You've seen how fleeting life is. You've seen how quickly things can go like left of center, and you could be left out in the cold. Do you want to spend this precious time really trying to? Yeah, you tried to get me, but it's all good. No, you tried to get me, but it's okay.
Yeah,
I'm still here. And it's the same set of words, but it's a completely different tone now. And I want to be fluent in that language that you mentioned, that language of compassion. And so I think this is part of that maturation process.
Yeah.
And I know enough to know that I don't know everything. And so I have really sought mentors all my life who are older than me, and I didn't realize I was doing that. And I think it started with my first set of mentors, my grandparents. And so through the years, I've surrounded myself with people who are much older than I, because chronologically, it would seem they've experienced things that I haven't. Now, I know I'm much younger than some of the people I've befriended, and I've experienced things they've never experienced. But from what they've experienced, if they are older, then I take mental notes, and I try to not step on the landmines that maybe they've stepped on. But I just think that it all begins with just care. I think we've talked about that before. Just care. If you care, that's a hell of a start.
Yeah.
If you just care, then we can get somewhere. But if you don't even care, then we're just going to be spinning our wheels here, and it's going to be wasted motion. And with that, you're going to get tired. Just like in any track meet, if you got wasted motion, you're going to get exhausted a lot faster. But if it's smooth, if it's fluent, then we can get somewhere.
Yeah.
We can make some minor tweaks, and we can fix some issues. And I want to push conversations that people don't want to have. I looked at it like a disadvantage when I was the only person of color in the room. And I now I see, you know what? Yeah, I'm an expert on this when it comes to this particular field, because I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to back it up with what I know. And I'm going to keep pitching this story, and I'm going to keep pitching this experience. You can't tell me that's not true, because you haven't coexisted with me in this particular world. And so I see that as a superpower, if you will.
Yeah.
My ability to step into multiple worlds and be a polyglot in that regard. be multilingual in that regard.
Yeah.
Because of all those experiences.
And it's so powerful what you've been able to do, and I don't want to continue. We'll drag the interview out, but I do want to know, what do you want your legacy to be? I mean, you've accomplished so many great feats. You've won Emmys. You've worked in the biggest markets. You've a lot of things that many young men just dream of doing. You've already accomplished. Where do you see this going, and what do you hope your legacy will be?
I want my legacy to be my wife and kids to be proud of what we've accomplished, because it's been a collective effort. None of those accomplishments have been mine alone. Sure, my kids didn't go into the booth and voice the package. My wife didn't write down, didn't transcribe the script or anything like that. But the conversations that she and I have encouraged me to pursue some of these opportunities. She's held me down at a time when I couldn't afford free.
Yeah.
My kids are my reason why. They, I want to see them succeed, because where I can't go, they will go. And I tell them all the time that they're going to take over the world, and I wholeheartedly believe that. And to answer your question even further, check this out, dude. Check this out. This is how a blessing works, where it impacts you directly or indirectly. I got both. I talked to my daughter last night, who just turned 18 a few weeks ago. You know, the whole situation with coronavirus, with COVID-19, and kids are out of school right now, and she's trying to complete the semester so she can graduate high school. She has been a phenomenal student. She didn't tell me this, right? And that was what I was upset about. She says, "Oh, Dad, did I tell you I got word back about one of these scholarships?" I was like, "Well, you told me about this essay you wrote. You won a few $100s for that, but was there something else?" She was like, "Oh yeah, well, for one of the universities I applied to, I got a full ride scholarship."
Wow.
I think you buried the lead, Isis. Her name is Isis. I was like, I think you buried the lead. But, what is going on? Why did you not tell me about this? And then I'm like, wait, I can't have that tone. I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm upset. Because she's like, "Hey, girl, why don't you?"
Oh, that's awesome.
She was just like, yeah, she was just like, "Dad, I think she's really down about being away from her friends and, having no physical contact. And, we forget about the impact it's having on the kids."
Yeah.
Yeah. So she applied to some historically black colleges and universities. For one of them, she's received a full ride scholarship. She's trying to decide on the best where she wants to go, or if she wants to go to another HBCU. She's done all her homework to figure out whether this is going to be the best university for her to become a nursing assistant or a nurse practitioner. This child has been on the ball, and I think she was underselling it because she constantly feels like myself, maybe she could do more. Maybe she's not doing enough.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to be careful about what we say, because our kids are picking up all of this.
Yeah.
And I said, look, you got to celebrate your victory. I got to post something about that here in a moment on social media.
Yes,
but
sir.
that's part of my legacy.
Yeah.
That's not my win per se. That's her win. But I'm winning because I'm living vicariously through that victory. That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
A full ride academic scholarship.
Oh man, that's huge, dude.
Wow.
And with everything that she's had to battle, and I mean, I think you got to give it some context.
Absolutely.
Everything that she's
chemotherapy for the past 2 years.
Yeah, chemotherapy, having to fight through that. It's you got to give that. That's a huge accomplishment. Because she was taken out of school. It was so people don't think about the impact of those things, but I think it speaks a lot to her perseverance, and I think a lot of that perseverance she got from you because you endured something very similar.
Yeah, I did. I went through chemotherapy as a freshman in college as I developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I still got the scar on my neck to prove that I had a mass removed. I went through chemo, then I went through radiation, and you know what? In that trying time, Dante, you don't even think about it. My grandma said to me, you got to make it because you got a little girl to live for. I was a dad as a freshman in college.
Yeah.
And talk about taking on a load. I was going to school full time, I think 15 hours. But then I was working another 15 to 20 hours. Then I was playing football. Then I had her. And I'm like, all this doing it, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, of course, I couldn't play ball as I was going through chemo. And I was still working. And, of course, still a full-time dad. And you've got this infant. And so I think energy is transferable. So I hope that perseverance is something that I transferred. You'd like to think that your kids are the best of you.
Yeah.
And I told her that I sent her a little card for her birthday. She and my 5-year-old share a birthday. And I told her, I said, your superpower is resilience. You know, simply because of everything. And that was prior to learning about this scholarship.
Yeah.
And so that's part of my legacy.
Dude,
I want my kids to look back and say, my dad will not let me fail.
And I'd love to know what she wrote her essay on. You know, because
I asked her to see it last night, and she kind of chuckled to herself because we were on FaceTime. She's like, "Yeah, I don't ever let you see my." I said, "I know. I'd like to see what you wrote it over. I don't know. Maybe that's I don't want to disappoint dad thing. There's that."
Yeah. Oh, man, I appreciate you. Look, man, thank you so much for joining us right here on Beyond the Brand. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You know, I know this story is going to inspire and encourage so many people. And that's why I started the podcast, because I want to be able to tell these stories. I want people to know that we're not rare, you know, that we exist, and that despite where you started, you can, God has a purpose for you, and you can overcome.
Yeah, and I want to leave you with this. My grandma says you ain't got to look like what you're going through. And I tell my daughter, my daughters and my son all the time, you got this.
Yeah.
So, you know what, Dante, you got this. Is there anybody out there listening? If you doubting yourself, you got this.
Hey, Frank, man, thank you so much for joining us. To everybody tuning in, thank you so much for joining us right here on Beyond the Brand. And we will see you again next week. Thanks again. You all have a good day.
This is Beyond the Brand with Dontaye Carter, where we go behind the scenes and tell stories about some of today's most dynamic brands, businesses, and the people behind them. So sit back, relax, and listen to Beyond the Brand.
Beyond the Brand. Beyond the